we'll begin it today. In fact, I have combined it with module 2. The reason is that it is a small one, and it also very similar to our second module, so that you can have a kind of same cohesion. So this is the syllabus for module 3. It is basically talks about the environmental issues as well as some social effects of a project. That is, you can see here the syllabus. Environmental and social aspects of project, that is the heading, and under that we'll discuss things like environmental considerations in project evaluation, primary issues and secondary issues in the feasibility study, and finally the SCBA, that is the social cost benefit analysis. In fact, it is something related to our appraisals that we have discussed in the previous module classes. So basically, again, you are checking that how viable your project is in terms of environment as well as its social impacts. Means the impact can be positive and negative. So we are calling that as cost and benefit, right? So cost is something which is negative impact on the society, and benefit is something positive impact on the society. So just to name a few so that you can remember things clearly. Cost to the society may be pollution, right? Maybe some environmental issues, maybe related to the water bodies you are polluting, or maybe you have rehabilitated a lot of people during the project, and that creates some kind of problem to their lives and rehabilitation. So these are all costs. Apart from that, there is a owner of the project who is spending on the project, right? So that is the cost basically. And benefits, as you can see, there can be again the benefit to the promoter. Promoter means the company who is spending on the project. At the same time, there can be indirect benefits to the public at large, means by providing direct or indirect employment, or maybe improving the lives, living standard of the people living nearby, improving the infrastructural facilities associated with the project, because once there is a project at a place, so the cost of land will increase nearby, there will be connectivities, there will be roads and infrastructure, everything will be improved. So there are some indirect benefits to the project. Of course, the projects we are particularly in this module we are focusing upon are definitely infra projects, or maybe some industries or plants, that kind of projects. But when we are talking about these IT or computer related projects, service related projects, that may not be that much relevant for this kind of discussion, because these IT projects have a very least impact on environment compared to some infra project like thermal power plant or steel plant or cement industry or mining industry, etc. So we'll discuss about two issues here, as I have emphasized on environment as well as social impacts. So let us proceed. Okay, so what are the environmental considerations in project evaluation? So again, it is coming under the detailed planning stage, or you can say it is contemporary to your appraisal stage. So at that stage, you have to look into what are the environmental issues that can come up with this project, and what are the solutions or what are the measures that you can plan beforehand, so that you can have a environmentally or ecologically viable kind of project, which we are calling as sustainable in present times. So the four main environmental issues that are most likely to influence the activities of a project are these four mainly: sustainability, waste disposal, pollution, climate change, right? As I said, sustainability is becoming very popular in the present time. Can anyone just tell me what is the meaning of sustainability? Have you read any subject related to environment till now? I think there is some paper on environment and all this. Have you studied it somewhere? Yes, right. Right, right, good. So you have a good enough background on this environment and all that, so my job becomes easier. So, see, these are the four aspects or four main environmental issues you can divide for your project. Sustainability, as I asked you, it is related with something which you are uh, taking care of your future, basically, right? Future generation, particularly, and you are thinking about the kind of natural resources or raw materials which are there in the nature, provided by the nature. You are thinking that you don't have the rights to consume all that in your generation. So that is basically something related with sustainability. You are taking care of your future generation. So how to minimize or how to minimize the wastage of the natural resources particularly, and how to best utilize. Of course, you have to utilize, otherwise there will be no progress, no development if you are not using your natural resources. But at the same time, you have to be judicious in the selection and consumption of that, so that you'll not waste on those precious and those limited kind of resources, be it any kind of ores, mines, or water source, or things like that. So that is sustainability basically. Waste disposal is another aspect where the kind of waste that your project or your plant is going to produce. It can be solid, it can be gaseous, liquid. So how you are disposing it? Are you freely just disposing at that to atmosphere or to the water bodies or to landfills, or you are taking care of that? Means if you have some measures like treatment of that to minimize the bad effects of that on your environment, all that. So that needs some investment, some planning. So that is the waste disposal. So there are various forms of waste you are creating depending on the type of industry. Sometimes it's very difficult to live near some plants like cement plants, etc. The reason is that the kind of waste that they live into the atmosphere, the air quality will be very poor and you cannot live nearby. Pollution is also related to that. So what kind of pollution you are creating, and what are the measures you have to take care. You have to, think or plan so that you can minimize this pollution and all this. And another part is the climate change. So this is also continuously happening. And because of this climate change, what kind of effect it will have on your project, and how your project idea or project that you are going to implement will adapt to this kind of climate change. So this is another effect. Another issue or aspect. So these are four aspects. Now there is a term called EIA, or in short, the full form is Environmental Impact Assessment. So this term is also in the recent times is mostly used in project proposals. That is EIA. So this environmental impact assessment is becoming important in the present times. Of course, you all know that we people are talking about environment and with more emphasis in the recent times, right? In the recent times, maybe we got the idea that you are not going to ignore it for long because of the things that is happening around you. Of course, there are government regulations and all that, but at the same time, we are putting more emphasis on this EIA because things you cannot just ignore it for long. So that's why. But the reason is, the main issue with this is most of the cases, the projects just look into this EIA aspect to fulfill the regulations or the norms of the regulatory bodies, but the real approach should be a very honest and genuine concern for the environment. I'm talking about again for infra projects, but in most of the cases, it is just limited to fulfill the norms. Somehow the government should be give you license that yes, you can go ahead, and that's it. But this is a wrong approach, particularly in the third world countries. You can see that, of course, there is a long debate between these developed and third world countries that you are the main creators of pollution and climate change. They are blaming each other. Of course, there's not a point to debate, but all are equally responsible. But I'm talking about the mindset of Indian business people, or maybe there are other industries which are outside India. These environmental rules, regulations are just to make satisfied during the licensing process. And once you are getting the license, then you can throw the things around. So that is what exactly happening. We are actually giving the least importance to these kind of things because it does not have a direct impact on our profit or directly on us. We are not able to see the kind of long-term effect it will have on the coming generations and all that. Anyway, there are some countries which we must praise for this, and they are really very concerned about their environmental issues. And of course, India is not one of them. So this EIA is a study which is within the project proposal that you have to cover, and you have to fulfill all the impact assessments of your project. What kind of wastages you are generating, what kind of pollution you are creating, what kind of measures you are going to take. So that has to be included in the project plan itself. It's not that you will implement that once you will complete the project. No, it has to be cleared beforehand, and it has to be cleared from the various regulatory authorities if it is such kind of project. Like you must add up some rules of forest rules for the states, and there is some organization called NGT, National Green Tribunal. So these are agencies which check your project and give a green signal or kind of clearance to go ahead. So these issues are there which are related to completely environment. So there are many other things like land disputes, water roads, wildlife man conflicts, debates for rights over forest resources, and controversies about mining areas and their management have become common across the country, right? Again, so these are related to all these things that are mentioned here are related to some kind of project which I mentioned earlier, maybe some industry or new kind of mining site, or maybe some other plant or chemical industry, etc., where you have to acquire some land, right? And you have to find some water sources, and maybe you are disposing your liquid waste to some water bodies, maybe rivers. And of course, there is issue of wildlife and man conflicts. There are many zones in which they are reserved for some particular wild animals, and so there will be conflicts, like there are elephant corridors or tiger reserve areas. So all these things comes into picture when a new project is thought which are of that nature. Okay, so again, rights about forest resources, controversies about mining. There are many such stories you'll find for mining projects particularly. I can remember many examples of Vedanta facing many issues like conflicts with people living nearby in the forest areas particularly. They are the inhabitants of that from a long time, and you cannot replace them. They have their own ecosystem they have developed. You cannot replace them. And so there are many projects being abandoned. Some bauxite mine plants, I remember, in Odisha was abandoned from Vedanta because of these issues, right? And it continues to happen whenever there is some conflict like this. So these issues must be discussed in the first stage itself, in the planning stage itself, that what kind of land dispute can be there and all this. So projects where environmental and social considerations have not been taken into account or addressed early on had to suffer substantial delays. So this is the reason that if we are not taking care of all these issues, like either social considerations or environmental considerations at the planning stage itself, then it will become a hurdle in a latter part. So if you face the hurdle at the latter part of the project, this is costing you, right? Because you have invested by that time. So it is better to deliberate upon that at the early stage itself, that what can be the environmental and social issues, right? Okay. suffer substantial delays, okay, which further resulted in upsetting the budgetary limits. Okay, so that costs you. So some projects had to be suspended for a long time or even dropped completely in India. A few large-scale mining projects and hydropower projects fall in this category. So you just look into the history of these kind of projects, like mining projects, hydropower projects, automobile plant projects. So you'll find there are such stories of conflict. For example, you can pick up the popular example of nano plant in West Bengal that has been abandoned because of this conflict. There was a patch of agricultural land. People was not ready to leave that. Similarly, there are many hydropower projects. Issues are there in Uttarakhand. You can see what are the hydropower projects which face the problems. Similarly, some mining projects, I gave the example. So it used to happen because of these conflicts with social order as well as environmental requirements. Of course, there is an infamous example of your Bhopal gas tragedy. If you look into the story of that, you will understand what is the story and how so many, thousands, millions of people died of that accident in Bhopal. So that gives you the exact example of if the environmental issue, social issue is not considered in a project, then what it can happen. So that is the most infamous example that how a government allowed such a dangerous project at the center of a city, and what is the result you all know. You must have heard of this Bhopal gas tragedy. So environmental management is often viewed from a narrow regulatory perspective. So here, what exact picture I am giving you? The environmental management is most often viewed from a narrow regulatory perspective. Means just fulfill the regulations, guidelines, norms, then go ahead. If there is no genuinity in its implementation, that is the reason. For most project managers, all it means is getting an environment clearance or a forestry clearance. A good deal of energy is spent on how to circumvent the legal requirements, and if not, how to minimally comply with the clearance conditions. Right? So, very rudely, it has been mentioned here that this is the way the project managers or the promoters try to look into environmental aspect. How to minimally comply. Minimally comply means whatever guidelines are there, just to satisfy that and just to manipulate on that so that you will get the certificate of clearance. So this is not the right way in fact. However, there is a need to understand that environmental management is not about regulations alone, right? It should be genuine and it should be a kind of holistic approach, not just a regulatory requirement. It's a mindset, in fact, for the promoter and all the people and stakeholders involved in a project. The mindset, actually. The concept of environmental sustainability revolves around health, safety, and the resources which people need and use for living and livelihood. So what happens practically, actually, they simply throw many such regulations or guidelines into air when they actually implement it. What is the reason? The reason is actually you have to put in more effort. You have to spend more. I think these are the two things which they want to avoid, right? So they take the risk, right? They take the risk of life of people, health of people, for the sake of saving few bucks and putting less effort for the project. There is a thing. Let us take the construction industry as an example. This industry is responsible for about 25 to 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world, right? I think there is no civil students in this class today. They all left because they have wrongly registered here. Anyway, see, we all are involved with construction, right? We need houses, so construction industry is flourishing. But at the same time, if you look into this data, right? This construction industry is responsible for about 25 to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions like CO2, methane, etc. In the world, and it is also responsible for about same percent of energy consumption, right? 15% of water consumption and about 40% of the waste generated in the world. Simply means only the construction industry. About 20 to 30% of the total waste generated end up in landfills. Right. So this is wrong planning. See, this 20 to 30% of the total waste. So you are generating a huge amount of waste, and it is being end up in landfills, or you are disposing that to water or some other source. So nearly 15% of the material purchased at the worksite ends up as waste, mainly due to weak project management. Right. So you visit any infrastructure project like a completion of a commercial building or a real estate project. Just after the completion, you visit there. You can identify the extent of wastes that they are throwing around. Right. So this is an example of weak project management or management in general, and because of which your project is not economically, I mean, environmentally viable. Okay. This figure should be of interest to any project manager who intends to reduce the cost of operation and maximize profit. So, in the name of development, actually, we are compromising on the environmental issues. That is a fact. So, this is a quotation. I liked it and I picked it here. Only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been poisoned, only after the last fish has been caught, will one find that money cannot be eaten. So that speaks all about the development and the environment. Now, coming to the projects, we already know there are many appraisals that we are doing, like technical appraisals, commercial appraisal, economy, and all that. So similarly, there is another appraisal that is maybe added and given more emphasis in the recent time. That is the environmental and ecological appraisal for the project. So before implementing, let us look into what are the environmental and ecological aspects of this project, right? What are the positives, what are the negatives, how we can enhance it, how we can mitigate the bad effects of that project. So all that will be under this appraisal. So you can look into the what is the impact of the project on the quality of air, water, land, noise, human life, or any other aspect depending on that nature of the project. So you have to study what is the impact of this. Suppose you are polluting, so what is the impact of that on the air quality? Right. So how to treat that pollutants from your exhaust and how to minimize the impact of that. As I said, it needs effort and it needs money, expenditure, some investment, and you are compromising on this. The promoter is compromising on this. Otherwise, there are some way out. By putting more efforts, by putting more investment, you can definitely minimize the impact of it. But you are ignoring that fact because you are giving less priority to that. That is the fact. So major projects such as mentioned here, cause the environmental damage, right? So particularly, as I said, the projects which are construction project, infrastructure projects, power plants, cement industries, real estate industries like bulk drug manufacturing, chemicals, leather processing. Can you add a few more to this, which are causing environmental damage? Can you add few? Am I audible to you? Just add few examples to these projects or industries which cause environmental damage. Okay, the thing. Action areas, right? Action areas means as I said, that okay, you found that you are going ahead with a project because of your compulsion, because your nature of business is that, but your project is definitely creating some kind of environmental negative impacts. There is no way. But what are your action areas? How to minimize it or how to completely eliminate it? So that also you have to look into, right? So again, action areas can be clean environment, use energy. Again, in the energy also you have to minimize the energy which are from fossil fuels, right? So there are many means of saving upon that. Maybe you can make use of your maximum extent of solar energy, for example, maybe any other source if it is possible, uh, which are not using any fossil fuels. So that way you can compensate. Suppose you are giving some negative carbon footprints, but at the same time, if you can reduce it by some other means which it can compensate. So that way, these are some action areas. And regarding the consumption of your water and source of water, your waste disposal, quality of air, noise is also kind of pollution. You must have studied it earlier, right? And land, so green spaces and biodiversity, right? What is biodiversity? ओके सो आप लोग भी एनवायरनमेंट पेपर को ऐसे ही लिए हो जैसे कंपनीज लेते हैं, राइट? जस्ट पढ़ो और पास करो, ठीक है? See, there are many aspects. See, either you can ignore it or you can give full importance to this. So that makes the difference, right? If it is a polluting industry or the project is creating some environmental impacts, negative impacts, then as I said, how to compensate it? What are the action areas, right? So these are various areas in which that project or that company can focus upon during its operation, so that it can at least compensate to some extent, right? Clean environment, right? You can well treat your exhaust systems like your air exhaust or maybe your water exhaust or your solid exhaust. You can treat it, for example, solid waste, instead of sending that to landfills, you can convert that to some usable forms. Let's say nowadays you can see the steel plants, they are making use of their fly ash into fly ash bricks. Earlier, maybe 20-30 years back, I'm talking, they used to dump those fly ash to the nearby ponds and rivers. There are many stories you can find. Even many villages got affected because of the dumping of their waste fly ash from thermal power plants, etc. Right? So, see, that is one thing. Easily you can pick your ash and you can create your ash pond and you can dump it nearby. But you know, when you are dumping your ash nearby, so it is affecting the health and water bodies of the villages, people living nearby. There are health issues. There are other livelihood issues. Right? There are many stories is coming to my mind now. So that's the easy thing, easy way out. But if you can put the effort and investment, as I'm saying, right? You do research. What can be done with your fly ash? How you develop technology? Suppose you found that okay, these fly ash, instead of dumping into ash ponds, we can convert that into bricks. Now many fly ash bricks are available in the market. So isn't it a good solution? Similarly, for each and every problem, if I have a genuine or honest approach to give a good environment, there is a way out. There is a way out. But if you are ignoring, then that's the way we used to work. So even wherever you are working, how to maintain the flora and fauna of that area, right? How to maintain it requires a conscious effort from the promoter or the company, right? Many companies are also good at that. Maybe Tata some instances of Tata is there, which tries to maintain the biodiversity and to some extent the social structure around it by providing some kind of CSR activities. So it is again up to your plans, your policies, your mindset, that to what extent you want to compensate for the wrongs that you are doing to the society, right? So that is the thing which comes under the action areas. Action plans in projects. So the same thing, but how you can do some activities or some action plans for your project to compensate for the kind of negative environmental effects of your project, right? You can have an environmental management section or a team or a group or a department for that matter to look into that during its continuous operation, right? So that is one of your action plans. You have an environmental management team. Waste and energy management, you can have the source of energy that you are using. You can have a better utilization of that. Instead of wasting energy at each and every point, you can save upon that, right? Be it your machines or your electrical consumptions or any other energy use, like maybe compressed air is a energy, and if you are using it properly, then it has to be maintained and it has to be properly monitored. It's not like that you will just run the compressor for the whole day and you are using it for 5 minutes, right? So you'll not able to see it, but you have wasted a huge amount of electrical energy by running your compressor for a long time, wherever your use was just for 5 minutes. Similarly, for machines also, there can be auto cut systems in your machines. If it's not using, it should auto cut type. So there are various means which are, of course, in present time, more emphasis is being given for this energy. Of course, the source of energy. What is the source of your energy? What is the percentage of green energy you are using in your plants? Maybe for lighting, you can redesign your plants and your factories using proper means so that you will get natural light instead of artificial electricity lights, powered lights. You can have seeds which are on the top of the plants which are transparent so that you will get enough sunlight. So these, if you can audit it, actually there is something called energy audit. If you can properly audit it, you will find it is in fact saving a lot of money for your operational costs also. It is not only saving the energy, but at the same time it is also beneficial for you. So as I said, whether there is some conscious effort for this or it is simply ignored. So that is the point here. So in any project, in the present times, these environmental issues are getting more emphasized compared to the old days. Economical consumption, eco-consumption, consumption of everything, all the resources, be it water, electricity, or any other source, or even your raw material. Economical consumption, all right? So that also needs a proper planning and effort. Information campaigns, right? All your staffs, all your operators and employees must know about this thing. It's not that only the top management knows that environment is important and the employees don't care about it, or even do not know what is this people are talking about. So there must be campaigns, there must be some kind of awareness programs among the stakeholders. Okay, we should save water, we should save this and that. So that needs an information campaign. So once that is happening, then maybe slowly things will change. Annual budget for environmental, as I said, you need money, you need investment, right, to save environment. So you have to allocate some fund for that. You have to allocate some fund for that. Okay, this is the annual budget for the environmental actions. Whatever actions is deemed fit for that particular project, that you have to allocate some budgets. Public incentives, right? You can encourage the stakeholders by holding competitions. You can give grants to the maybe to some researchers or students or universities, right? You do research on this. We are facing a problem like this. how to solve it. So you can give R&D projects to universities or research institutions, grants, etc. So that's public incentives. Green accountancy. This is very important, as I said. Auditing of your track record of your performance, right? Your carbon footprint, what do you call it, or the green accountancy, right? How much you have saved from green energy, right? If you keep an account, then maybe it will encourage you to proceed in that direction, because you'll find it is okay, it's beneficial, right? So that is green accountancy. So what is the savings that you have made, financial savings, and so that is called green accountancy. Public-private partnership. So these are various action plans that can be suggested or implemented in the project or after the project completion of the project during its actual operation. But it has to be planned beforehand. Let us say, suppose you are talking about a project of a thermal power plant, for example, right? You didn't talk anything about environmental issue during the project, during the planning, right? And the project got completed. Thereafter, if you think about environment, it will create a lot of problems. It has to be thought beforehand, because according to that planning, the project will come up. If it is not included in the project stage itself, then later on, if you are taking this as a corrective measure for environment, that is not the best way, right? Instead of taking a corrective measure, it has to be a proactive measure from beforehand, I mean, in the planning stage itself. That's why you are looking at this and conducting the environmental or ecological appraisal, right? So it is 9:55. I think I should stop here today. Do you have anything to add? Do you have any experience on this? Have you faced any environmental hazards till now? Anyone living in Delhi and getting the smoke from Punjab, Haryana side? No. Good. So you are all living at nice environments, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so maintain that environment. I'll stop here today.